I stood there, watching my family clear out of my house, realizing they had been using me all along. But now it was my turn to take control. Hey there. Welcome to today's story. What are you up to right now? Whatever it is, make sure you're ready to dive into this one because it's going to be a wild ride. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of a character who's about to face a huge challenge. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to fight for what was rightfully yours? Where family, trust, and everything you've built was on the line? Stick around till the end to see how our protagonist handles the situation and what they learn along the way. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep the stories coming, and trust me, there's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for tuning in. I can't wait to bring you even more amazing tales. Growing up in a small suburban neighborhood, I never imagined I'd own something as grand as a lakefront cabin. My name is Avery, and I've spent most of my life working tirelessly to break free from the limitations my family unknowingly placed on me. By the time I was 28, I had saved every penny I earned, sacrificing vacations, social events, and even small luxuries just to reach my goal. I knew I wanted something different from what I had known, a place where I could breathe freely, away from the constant noise of family obligations. The lake house was supposed to be my sanctuary, an escape from the chaos of life. After years of pinching pennies, I finally found the perfect place, sitting right on the edge of a quiet, serene lake. When I first stepped into that cabin, bathed in morning light and the smell of fresh pine, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced before. I could already picture the summer evenings spent on the porch, watching the sunset with a cold drink in hand. This wasn't just a house. It was the future I had always dreamed of. I called my parents, Marlene and Charlie, along with my younger brother, Elliot, to share the news. They were thrilled, almost too thrilled. I had hoped they'd see this as a victory for all of us, a symbol of how far I had come. My mother, ever the perfectionist, immediately began imagining the ways she could improve it. She suggested new furniture, repainting the walls, even replacing the kitchen counters. I smiled and agreed, even though in my heart, I knew that I wanted to keep things just as they were, a simple, cozy retreat. But I was so caught up in the excitement that I brushed off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. I thought I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew that the cabin wasn't just going to be my sanctuary. It was quickly becoming something much bigger than that. Everything seemed perfect at first, but that was only because I wasn't paying attention. I thought I had everything under control, that this cabin would be a fresh start, my sanctuary. But as the days passed, it became clearer that I had missed some signs, some subtle clues that things weren't quite as they seemed. 2 weeks after I moved into the cabin for the first time, I had to head back to the city to catch up on work. It had been a busy couple of weeks with my new job, and the cabin had become a peaceful escape from the constant rush of city life. I relished the time alone, the stillness of the lake and the simplicity of the house. The world felt far away in those moments. But as time went on, I started to realize I hadn't heard from anyone about the cabin. Not a text from my mom, not a phone call from my younger brother. Nothing. I brushed it off at first, assuming they were just busy. But the silence continued, and the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach grew. It wasn't until the weekend that I decided to drive back to the cabin. I was craving some solitude, craving the quiet that only the lake could provide. I drove up that Friday evening, expecting to enjoy a few peaceful days to unwind. But what greeted me when I arrived shattered the calm I had been hoping for. The moment I turned onto the gravel driveway, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. The parking area, which had once been empty and peaceful, was now full of unfamiliar cars. My mind raced. This wasn't just a couple of friends dropping by for a visit. It looked like a full-on gathering. I could hear the faint beats of music, the laughter of voices, the kind of noise that should never have been in my space. My heart sank. I stood frozen for a moment, clutching the takeout bags I had brought for a quiet dinner. My dream home, my sanctuary, had turned into a spectacle. I slowly walked toward the porch, trying to steady my breath. The weight of the situation felt heavy on my chest. Every step I took was like a reminder that something was wrong. I reached the door and tried the key. It wouldn't fit. Panic began to rise in my chest. My fingers fumbled as I tried again. No matter how many times I turned the key, it wouldn't work. The lock had been changed. A chill ran through my body, and I couldn't help but stand there for a moment, feeling utterly defeated. This was my house, the house I had worked so hard to buy and make my own, and now I couldn't even get inside. Was this really happening? I thought to myself. Was my sanctuary now someone else's playground? My hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed my mom's number. The call rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, Mom, the key doesn't work," I said, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible, though I could feel the anxiety creeping up. "I think the lock's been changed." "Oh, darling," she replied, her voice too casual for my liking. "It's just that we needed some privacy for the weekend. You know, you're always so busy anyway. Don't you think you should give us some time to relax too?" The coldness in her voice made my stomach churn. My entire body tensed. I could hear laughter and voices in the background, people talking, music blasting. It was clear now, my sanctuary had been hijacked. My retreat had become a party house, and I wasn't invited. I stood there, bags of cold food in my hands, feeling utterly powerless. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This is my house, I kept thinking, but I couldn't find the words to make it real. I had worked so hard for this, for the peace and quiet, for the ability to just be alone, for once in my life. And now I couldn't even step inside. That night, I sat in my car, parked outside my own house, watching as strangers danced on my porch. My thoughts were swirling. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was just being dramatic. After all, it was only a weekend, right? They were family after all. But a cold, gnawing sense of betrayal settled in. Why hadn't I set clearer boundaries from the start? Why had I allowed them to walk all over me in my own home? The music was pounding, the voices growing louder as the evening wore on. The laughter from inside felt like it was echoing in my ears, and it made my blood run cold. Why did I let them into this space? I kept asking myself. This was supposed to be my escape, my haven. But now it was nothing more than a backdrop to their enjoyment, a mere setting for their social gatherings. I should have anticipated this. I should have known better. My thoughts were a blur of confusion, guilt, and frustration. As I sat there, I couldn't help but remember the day I moved in. The excitement I had felt when I first unlocked the door, the hopes I had pinned on this place. This was supposed to be the beginning of something new. But now, it felt like I was losing something precious, something I could never get back. I could feel my anger building, but so was my confusion. Part of me wanted to confront them right then and there, storm into the house and demand answers. But another part of me was still holding back, afraid that if I did, I would create a rift I couldn't repair. This was my family. How could they do this to me? I had given them everything, my trust, my generosity, and now my peace of mind. I had wanted this house to bring us closer together, but instead, it was driving a wedge between us. I couldn't decide whether to feel hurt or angry, or if I should just let it go. Eventually, I stepped out of the car, the cold night air hitting my skin, and walked around the side of the house. I needed to see everything with my own eyes. The window to the living room was wide open, and I could see through the glass. There, in my living room, were people I didn't even know, lounging on my couch, drinking wine, and making themselves at home. My heart sank further. As I stood there, hidden in the shadows, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't just about the house. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. And right then, I knew I had to take control of my life again. But how? What could I do now that it had gone this far? The night dragged on, and I stayed there, staring at the house. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating, but there was also something else. A quiet determination starting to rise within me. I had spent too many years being the peacemaker, always giving in. It was time for that to change. But for now, I had to let the night unfold. I had to wait for the right moment and the right opportunity to take action. Because the one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't just stand by and watch my family destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. Took me 2 more weeks to get the courage to confront my family. It wasn't just the physical lock on the door that was keeping me out of my own house. It was the emotional lock I had put on myself, pretending that everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. They had crossed a line and I had to take control. I was tired of being the peacemaker, the one who always compromised to keep the peace. I had spent my life keeping the family together, but now it was time to put myself first. This was my house, my sanctuary, and I had worked too damn hard for it to let anyone take it from me. Every day that I spent agonizing over what to do felt like another day I was allowing them to walk all over me. I had to face the truth. My family didn't just want to use my cabin for a weekend. They were using me, manipulating my generosity, and taking advantage of the one thing I had fought for. And for what? To make themselves look good? To feel better about their own stagnant lives? It wasn't right, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see it. The signs had been there all along, subtle at first, like a flickering light that eventually turned into a blinding beacon of truth. I had been ignoring the red flags, thinking they were just temporary, thinking that I could fix things by being patient, by accommodating them as I always had. But there came a point where the walls I'd built to protect myself started to crumble, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I had started gathering evidence. I had seen my mom posting on social media, showcasing the kitchen I had spent months renovating, bragging about how generous I was with letting them use the cabin. It wasn't just one post either. It was multiple. There was one where she posed by the fireplace, acting as though it was her home, talking about how much she loved the new decor I'd carefully chosen. "So proud of my daughter always taking care of us," she had captioned one of the posts, as though I had invited her to use my house without asking for anything in return. And then there was my younger brother, Elliot, who had shown little interest in the house at first. He was never the type to care about those things. He'd always been too wrapped up in his own life, too distracted by his friends or his gaming. But suddenly, Elliot was tagging himself in posts at the cabin, posing as the host of the weekend's events. He was sharing photos of himself on the deck, acting like he was the one in charge of the space. It was clear now they weren't just using the cabin for the weekend. They were trying to claim it as theirs. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just harmless fun, just a little family indulgence. But deep down, I knew what was happening. They were erasing me from the picture, rewriting the story to make it seem like I was the one who was lucky to have them around. It made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't let it go on any longer. I was no longer going to be the silent observer, the passive daughter who let her family take everything she had worked for. I had to take action, and I had to do it soon before they completely hijacked what was mine. I called a lawyer. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I felt like I was walking into a battle I wasn't prepared for, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no choice. If I wanted to keep this house, to truly make it mine, I had to fight for it. And I wasn't going to do it passively like I had always done. No more being the good daughter. No more letting my family walk all over me while I silently accepted my fate. This was my life, my property, and I wasn't going to let them take it away from me without a fight. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman who had worked in real estate law for years. We sat down and laid out a plan. I needed proof of ownership, proof that they had been using the cabin without my permission, and I needed to gather everything I could that would support my case. It wasn't going to be easy. They had already made themselves comfortable in my home, acting like they were entitled to it. But I was determined to make sure the truth came out. As I gathered more evidence, I realized just how deep their manipulation ran. I found emails where my mom had discussed making improvements to the cabin and asking for my approval on things I never agreed to. I found photos of family gatherings that seemed innocent enough at first, but when I looked closer, I noticed subtle things. The way my brother positioned himself in the pictures as though he was the one in charge. The way my mom had been inviting people to the cabin without consulting me, as if it was never really my space. It was clear that my family had taken advantage of me for too long. They saw my success as an opportunity, not something to be celebrated. They saw my hard work as something to take for granted. And it hurt. It hurt more than I could ever put into words, because I had trusted them. They were supposed to be my support system, but instead, they had become my greatest obstacle. The more I prepared, the angrier I became. But there was something else too, a quiet determination. The betrayal I felt was like a knife to the chest, but it also ignited a fire in me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to stand up for myself, no matter how much it hurt. No more being the peacemaker. No more letting them take what was rightfully mine. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something for me. I wasn't doing it to please anyone. I wasn't doing it because I was afraid of disappointing anyone. I was doing it because I deserved it. And if that meant facing down my family, so be it. The day I decided to take action, I packed my car and headed back to the cabin. I could feel my hands shaking as I threw my essentials into the trunk. A mixture of nervous anticipation and simmering anger building inside of me. This time, I wasn't going to stand by and let my family walk all over me. I had spent too many years trying to please them, trying to be the good daughter. Today, that ended. Armed with legal papers and the support of a sheriff, I was ready to reclaim what was mine. It was time to put my foot down. The drive to the cabin was agonizing. I kept thinking about all the times I had been silenced, all the times I had put my own dreams aside to avoid rocking the boat. I was scared, no doubt, but more than anything, I felt a quiet determination rise up in me. This was my home. I had worked my ass off to make this place a reality, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own family, take it from me. When I arrived, the familiar sights of the cabin sent a wave of nostalgia crashing into me. The tall pines that surrounded the property, the deck where I had sat for hours with a book and a coffee, the smell of the fresh lake air that had always soothed my mind. But all of it, every inch of it, felt different now. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The music was blasting again, the kind of loud bass-heavy beats that had no place in my peaceful retreat. And the porch, my porch, was filled with strangers. They were laughing, talking, drinking, and dancing. It was like the house had been transformed into some kind of party zone, and I wasn't even invited. My heart began to race. I couldn't just let this happen anymore. I had given them the benefit of the doubt, assuming they'd come to their senses. But I had been wrong. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. The weight of the legal papers in my hand felt oddly reassuring, as if they were the key to unlocking my power again. I had the right to be here, I had the right to take control of this situation, and nothing could change that now. As I walked up to the front door, the familiar sounds of laughter and music faded away. I knocked on the door, firm and unyielding. My mother opened the door with a smile, but it was forced, fake even. It was the kind of smile I had seen a million times before when she was trying to cover up something she didn't want me to see. The second she saw me standing there with the sheriff, her face fell, the smile fading into a tight-lipped frown. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at me, her eyes flicking down to the sheriff standing beside me. His presence a silent but undeniable reminder that this wasn't a conversation. This was an ultimatum. "What is this?" she asked, trying to close the door behind her. But I stepped forward, blocking the entry with my foot. "Property reclamation," the sheriff said firmly, his voice unwavering. "I have the paperwork here, and the property is now under new ownership. You're all required to vacate immediately." My mother's eyes widened as she processed his words. The papers I handed her seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds in her hands, as though they were the last shred of control she could cling to, and I was taking it from her. She stared at the papers in disbelief, her face pale as the reality of what was happening sank in. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the documents, unable to come up with a response. The silence between us was suffocating, but it wasn't the awkward silence I was used to from family gatherings. It was the kind of silence that only comes when the truth is finally laid bare. Elliot, my younger brother, emerged from inside. His face was twisted in frustration. a deep frown creasing his forehead. "You can't do this, Avery. This is our house too," he screamed, his voice rising in panic. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, as if he could physically stop me from taking back what was mine. "No, Elliot," I replied calmly, my voice steady despite the rush of emotions swirling in my chest. "This is my house. You've had your fun, but now it's time for you to leave." The sheriff stepped forward, his presence a firm reminder that this wasn't just a family dispute. It was a legal matter. He positioned himself between me and Elliot, as if to ensure that no one would escalate the situation further. His professionalism, his calm demeanor, made me feel like I was in the right. This was justice. Within minutes, the house that had been filled with laughter and chaos was starting to empty out. I stood in the doorway, watching as my family gathered their things in silence. No one spoke, not even a word of protest. My mom moved slowly, her face pale, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. My brother, my sister, and the rest of the people who had been occupying my home now quietly filed out, taking their things with them. The party was over. As I stood there, watching them go, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? My home, my sanctuary, was mine again. But it was hard to ignore the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. It had all come crashing down in this moment, and as much as I had fought for it, I knew it was going to take time to heal. The sheriff, his job done, gave me a small nod. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice a contrast to the tension in the air. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, I'm good." As the last of them left, I stepped into the house, my house, and let the door close behind me. The silence that greeted me was unlike anything I had felt before. It wasn't the emptiness of loneliness. It was a quiet, peaceful calm. I took a deep breath, the weight of the last few weeks finally lifting. I walked into the living room, where the familiar furniture and decor welcomed me. I ran my fingers over the counter where my mother had stood so many times before, acting like this was hers. But now I was the one standing here. I was the one who had fought for this. I was the one who had built this home. I could finally breathe again. I looked around, taking in the space I had created for myself. It was mine, all of it, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me again. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the lake, I smiled to myself. This was just the beginning. Conclusion. After everything settled, I took a moment to stand on the deck of the cabin, looking out over the lake. The sunset was breathtaking, and for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I had stood up for myself, for what was mine, and in the end, I had reclaimed not only my home but also my sense of self. I made the decision to sell the cabin shortly after that. I realized that I had outgrown the space. What had once been a symbol of success had become a painful reminder of family betrayal. But the lessons I learned were invaluable. Sometimes the hardest part is not achieving your dreams, but protecting them from those who claim to love you. As I drove away, I knew that I was leaving behind more than just a house. I was walking away from the person I used to be, the one who let others walk all over her, and stepping into the future, one where I would no longer be anyone's backup plan. So, what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Did Avery's journey resonate with you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself and reclaim what was rightfully yours? Let's get a conversation started. Your feedback means the world to me. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next chapter. It's going to be just as intense and full of surprises. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end of the story. I truly appreciate you being here. Stay tuned for more. And remember, your support makes all the difference.